Irakoze and I'm a Junior Policy Officer in the Migration Program at the European Centre for Development Policy Management. We are here today at the European Development Days, and the theme of this year is addressing inequality. We stand here with Judicaelle Irakoze, youth leader from Burundi. You're a feminist writer, a social entrepreneur, a refugee advocate. So could you tell us a little bit more about the type of work that you do with women and girls living in refugee camps?
I can call it racial and gender equity work for almost 6 years now. It's a lived experience personally as an immigrant in the US and also as a refugee myself. We have been advocating for the state of Maine to integrate refugees and immigrants who come into the United States without any families, or most of them, like myself, who went there alone as teenagers. Then I started my nonprofit called Choose Yourself, and the work that we do with Choose Yourself is specifically working with women and girls in refugee camp. So for the past 3 and 4 years, I've been doing research work and advocating for the conditions of refugees in the camps. I traveled to Tanzania. Tanzania is a specific case because it has Burundian refugees from 1972. So there are a whole generation who don't know any other life than a life in the camp. So they don't know how life outside looks.
Yeah.
And that camp is located at the border of Tanzania and Zambia, and they don't know anything else. So they have lived on token foods their entire life. Then comes a generation of women and girls who were married at 16, 14, because child marriages have been one of the reasons they are trying to erase poverty by marrying their daughters at a young age. Then there comes that African culture when you have to choose between a boy and girl to send to school, you always choose the boy. That was the case in Nakivale. Many families are investing in the boy education more than the girls because schools is expensive and it's far, so they choose to keep the girls at home doing homework and then send the boys at school. So again, every crisis is gendered, so women and girls are the ones suffering, and I feel like with what's happening in the world right now, the refugee crisis isn't getting a lot of attention as it should.
Yeah, I really like that we talked about really the link specifically on between inequality and women. Perhaps you can also tell us a little bit more about the link, about actually the positive contribution that refugees can make, especially women and girls, and the positive link between their situation and development and growth.
So I think when we talk about refugees, most of the time we get lost in numbers. These are human beings. It's more than data. So these are human beings with dreams, with passions. Even though they are in refugee camps, they are really doing their best to survive. I spent a month living in refugee camp with them. These are young women who will wake up and sew some stuff to sell. They are making jewelry. They are really trying to be creative because they hope to make a life out of themselves. But what my organization have been doing is we believe that we can keep women and girls in the camp. There is no safe place for women, but refugee camp is the least women can be. So we have been economically empowering them, hoping we can create a life for them outside of the camp.
So what would you say, now that we are at the heart of the European institutions here in Brussels, and what would you say to big multilateral organizations such as the EU, or to also the AU, the African Union and African states? Like, what would you tell them?
First, I said it yesterday, I think every time some people sit to make a decision about a group of people and they don't have a seat at the table, ask yourself, how do you know if I'm making the right decision if that person isn't at the table to tell me how I could help them? And also there is a disconnect between this big organization and the grassroots organizing. So I don't know how the EU is going to make sure they listen to refugees, but they need to find ways they are connected to the local problems. That has been the disconnect between the EU as an institution and what refugees on the ground are going through. And the African Union actually needs to listen to young people. The African continent is young. Every African country is majority young. So these African leaders, when making policies that concern our future, they need to have us on the table and ask us, how can we help you? How can we make sure the future we are creating for you actually involves you?
That's very inspiring. Perhaps a last message to leave us with that we can take home?
There's a beautiful quote that I love from Assata Shakur. She said that whenever I wanted to do political work, I wanted to make sure I'm also aware of things going on the ground. So I feel like we shouldn't be disconnected of what's happening on the ground. Let's create policies that comes from lived experience, policies that comes from stories on the ground, at least that can connect the political part and the human part of it, because I think those are two things that must go together.
That's wonderful. Judicaelle Irakoze, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.